Minnesota channel, and the Minnesota Lakes Association. Additional support for this program provided by the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District, the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources, and the Catherine B. Anderson Fund of the St. Paul Foundation.
Welcome. I'm your host, Kim Carlson. Minnesota's lakes are at a critical juncture. They are changing and in some cases degrading rapidly. Most of the changes are due to increasing shoreland development. It's what we do on the land that affects the health of our lakes. The good news is that there are many things that we can do to solve this problem. It's up to us individually as landowners and collectively as citizens and governments. If we act now, we can protect our lakes for the enjoyment of generations to come. Minnesota is rich in lake resources. With 208,000 miles of shoreland, we have more shoreland than the states of Florida, California, and Hawaii combined. Lakes define who we are, what we do, and our quality of life. Let's think about lakes for a moment. What is it you value about your favorite lake? Is it catching a lunker or taking the grandchildren fishing? Going for a swim on a hot summer day? Spending time with family and friends boating? Watching wildlife or listening to the call of a loon? Or is it enjoying the beauty of a lake landscape? And your income may depend on clean lakes. Lakes represent the good life in Minnesota. Lakes define our natural and cultural heritage and represent a legacy for future generations. In many areas of Minnesota, lakes are the engines that drive the local economy. Tourism is a $9 billion industry in Minnesota. And while lakeshore prices continue to escalate, taxes from lakeshore accounts for only a small percentage of the income to lake communities. The real economic benefit is the dollars spent on these lake visits. These dollars can circulate throughout a community 8 times over. For example, dollars spent on lodging, food, bait, sporting goods, gifts, gas, and recreational services all help support a community. As you will hear from our guests, everything that we value in lake country is driven by the lake's water quality and habitat for fish and wildlife. It's time to find out what's happening on our shorelands and how better land use practices, regulations, and personal actions can protect the future of Minnesota's lakes. My first guest is Paula West, Executive Director of Minnesota Lakes Association. Paula, what's happening on Minnesota's lakes?
Well, Kim, up until about the 1920s, Minnesota's lakes were largely inaccessible to most people. But then we got better cars and better roads, and cabins started appearing on our lakes up north, and that tradition of going up north began. But in the last 25 years, we've seen some very dramatic changes on our shorelines, primarily due to shoreland development. Those cabins with tree-lined shores that attracted people to the lakes for many years are now being replaced with more suburban-type homes that have manicured lawns to the water's edge, and that can have very serious consequences for Minnesota's lakes. Another concerning trend is the development of the sensitive, marginal shorelands of shallow lakes and shallow bays of larger lakes. These areas of our lakes are often teeming with cattails and bulrushes, which are beneficial to the lake. They're spawning beds for fish, but they're very sensitive to even small changes in pollution amounts. Kim, our shorelands are changing in Minnesota. With most of the priority lakeshore already developed, these shallow lakes and shallow bays are primarily what's left to develop in Minnesota.
Paula, with most of the good shoreland being developed and the marginal shoreland now being taken, what does that mean for Minnesota's lakes?
Well, Kim, it means changing our expectations. When people build a larger home, whether it's seasonal or recreational, their expectations of what that shoreland should look like changes. It's different than when they just went up there for the weekend. They want to see a more manicured lawn, and often they want more services from the local community. They sometimes think they can convert that shoreland into what they consider to be the perfect lake lot with sandy shores and a nice beach and good swimming and no weeds or what we call aquatic plants. And they start trying to mess with Mother Nature, and there can be very serious consequences to the ecology of the lake when we start doing that.
So are these changes likely to continue?
Yes, they are going to continue as lake country continues to be developed. The north central region of Minnesota, which includes the Brainerd Lakes area and surrounding counties, has grown 25% between 1990 and 2000. and is projected to grow another 60% by the year 2030. And the popular lake regions around Alexandria, Fergus Falls, Detroit Lakes are also going to grow another 40%, and even southern Minnesota, where the lakes are very fertile, is experiencing pressures from shoreland development.
So what's the bottom line here? What do these demographic and development patterns mean for the future of Minnesota's lakes?
Well, the time is now to make right choices. As individuals and as local governments and state governments, we cannot wait another 25 years. It will be too late. The choices that we make today are going to impact the enjoyment of lakes for future generations to come and the economies of many communities in Minnesota. You know, development itself is not a bad thing. It is inevitable. It's how we develop, where we develop, and how much we develop on our shorelines that's going to make the difference between whether we protect them or whether we harm our lakes. As individuals, we can change our habits and how we manage our shoreline, but local officials in particular have very difficult decisions to make now in planning for shoreline development through their local ordinances. And state agencies have a responsibility to provide guidance as well as the resources that local governments need. We need to get beyond just looking at the short-term property tax gains that the increasing shoreland values bring and see that making protective choices now will protect the value of those shorelands in the future, and our clean, healthy lakes will bring tourists coming to our communities for many years to come.
Now we'll talk with Julie Westerlin of the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District. Julie, tell me why shorelines are so important.
Kim, lakes are among the most diverse ecosystems in the Midwest. And of all the plants and animals in that diverse environment, more than 90% of them make their home right here along the shoreline. So the shoreline really is a special place. Undeveloped shores have a variety of trees, shrubs, grasses, and aquatic plants, as well as things like dead trees, rocks, and other habitat that host a rich community of birds, fish, mammals, insects, turtles, frogs, and other critters.
And how is development affecting shoreline?
As the shoreline is developed, we're seeing sharp declines in the kinds of habitat I just described. The prominent trends on lake shores is what I call the suburban lake lot. Things like dead trees, which provide tremendous habitat, are the first to go. Then native vegetation is replaced by plants cultivated in nurseries, which have little habitat value, and lawns, which are often mowed right down to the water's edge. Kim, ecologists refer to Kentucky bluegrass as a habitat desert because very few animals can find the food, shelter, and nursery areas they need to make a living. Rock retaining walls go up because the shoreline is eroding away without the native vegetation, and the reeds, cattails, and other beneficial aquatic plants are replaced by blankets of sand, which again offer little or nothing in the way of habitat to all those animals that rely on the shoreline. Most people don't make these drastic changes intentionally. It's just that more and more people are living at the lake, and they've taken the suburban landscape mentality with them. We've been conditioned that when we live in a place, we mow the lawn and keep everything neat and manicured. But that's in direct conflict with the way nature intended shorelines to be, and folks don't realize the unintended negative consequences of their yard aesthetic.